This is a murder case that has been linked with the Delphi case, and I learned about it from Tom Webster, so thanks for that. Love your show, especially your funny little jokes. Hilarious. Anyways, just listen to the way that they describe both of these crimes, and it's like uncanny the way it's like exactly the same. Also, there is more to this show, and I will link it below. I just didn't want to like copy the whole entire thing. So please go and watch it on their channel. And I also included a little article at the end that has a little bit more details about like the method of death. So a little bit about like the staging and what they did to the bodies after the crime.
Complex, brutal, disturbing crime scene.
One of Boone County's most horrific killings remains unsolved. It's 12 years later, but the detectives working the Stephenson case are leaving no stone unturned. In recent months, their investigation has led them even to Indiana to look at a possible connection to this highly publicized Delphi murders.
In fact, they've traveled to at least 14 other states to follow up on leads, including several trips to Delphi, Indiana. And they're pursuing potential breaks in the case using a DNA profile.
May turned dark after a gruesome discovery.
It was a very complex, brutal, disturbing crime scene.
Two people, both 74 years old, were found dead inside their Boone County home. A beloved husband and wife, Bill and Peggy Stephenson.
We think it was a very quick surprise attack. There was some blunt force trauma.
Detective Coy Cox and his partner Tim Adams were sent to the scene. The house had been altered and the bodies were staged.
There were things that were done to their bodies that was horrific. They changed several things in the scene, which is really, really unusual for any murder scene anywhere in the country or in the world.
Whoever killed the couple did not take off right away.
There was quite a bit of time that the perpetrators, the killers, stayed in the residence or felt comfortable coming back to the scene.
In general, detectives believe that kind of behavior points to a suspect who knows the victims. And Bill and Peggy Stephenson were loved by many.
They were amazing people, good Christian people. They wanted to share their faith and their love with the community.
And Peggy's daughter, Beth Stephenson Victor, she describes her parents as devoted churchgoers, a couple who loved their big family. Peggy was the quiet one, an experienced and talented musician.
Played for many weddings, funerals, played for a couple of the grandkids' weddings. She loved to play the organ. She played the piano too.
Bill was the opposite, known as the life of the party. A man heavily involved in ministry, he shared his faith with truck drivers every Sunday at a truck stop in Florence.
They had a trailer out that they would open up during the week, and if truckers wanted to stop in and pray, they would pray with them.
That connection to the community became a possible lead for detectives Cox and Adams. Today, they handle the sheriff's cold case unit, but they're still investigating the Stephenson case. Over the years, they've interviewed a lot of truck drivers.
Early on in the investigation, we had information that someone had been at the truck stop looking for Bill pretty aggressively, banging on the door of the chapel, asking if anyone had seen Bill.
There are truckers they've ruled out, others still on their radar. They've also looked into Charles Stevie Stephenson, the nephew of Bill and Peggy. Detective Cox says they've even spoken to him recently. Stevie is locked up, spending life in prison for beating an Indiana woman to death with a skillet.
We feel pretty comfortable that that's in a good place. There is no final statement on there. It isn't that he's been cleared. But we have certainly vetted him in every way possible.
One of the largest developments in the case could still bring them the break they need to close it. Detective Cox says they have an unknown DNA profile.
We don't know who that DNA belongs to, and it was found at our crime scene.
It is complex, so genealogy isn't an option, at least right now. There is testing they can do to try to find a match, and that's something they're actively pursuing.
We're just still.
Detectives even traveled across state lines in recent weeks to see if what happened to the Stephensons has any connection to the murder of 2 young girls in Delphi.
We had received some information from an individual regarding the Delphi murders in Indiana, and they had said, for all of these reasons, we believe it may be the same person that was involved in the Stephenson case.
There was a complex crime scene.
It's pretty bad that somebody could stay, that they could stage something and stay with bodies like that for, multiple hours. It's pretty sick.
That's why detectives Coy Cox and Tim Adams are not willing to close the door on anything.
We are careful in this case because of the complexity of some of the evidence, not to say that anyone has been ruled out, but we certainly take it all the way down the path as far as we can to where it's like, okay, we don't see the need to go on down this path because it's not looking like that is our individual.
In November 2022, a tip led them to a neighboring state.
We had received some information from an individual regarding the Delphi murders in Indiana, and they had said, for all of these reasons, we believe it may be the same person that was involved in the Stephenson case.
Right away, detectives started looking into a possible connection between Bill and Peggy's 2011 murder and the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German in Delphi, Indiana in 2017, a case that's garnered national attention.
There's things that will make you really interested in a case, simply more than just somebody saying, hey, we think this person might have been involved. But we had a little piece of information that really made that case specifically interesting to us.
The information pointed Boone County investigators toward a specific person who had a specific item they were interested in.
I'm not going to tell you about that, what that item was. We recently been in the northern part of Indiana, investigating this guy, following him around, looking for things, collecting all of the information and the evidence that we would need to at least vet him as best we could with our case. He was cooperative. We were able to go down that path with him, and he articulated good reason to why that may have existed.
They sent what they found to Indiana State Police, since they are handling the murder investigation of Abby and Libby. To be clear, Detective Cox says their investigation into a potential link between the 2 cases did not include Richard Allen.
We received information from Indiana as it related to some persons, and we forwarded that to them. We did not send them the information that led them to Richard Allen. We sent them information that may have had some parallel consistencies with where they are with that case right now.
When Boone County detectives were in Delphi, Allen was already in jail, where he has been since October of 2022, accused of Abby and Libby's murders.
I know that sounds a little cloak and dagger, but I'm just sorry about that. We're not going any further with that.
That's not the only lead they're following.
We have 2 gentlemen that are in the trucking profession that we have collected DNA from, and we are awaiting response back from the Kentucky State Police Lab.
They're waiting on results from the lab to see if the truck driver's DNA matches the unknown profile found at the Stephenson crime scene. It has Detective Cox feeling hopeful. As someone who has been on the case since day one, it's personal.
That's hard. That's on my watch. That's my case. I want to solve it. I don't want to say it's more special, but it's a very special case, and really like to get it solved. As we would all of them, obviously, but yeah, this one has a little extra, tug.
For Bill and Peggy's family, all of these developments feel like a step toward peace, justice, and healing.
Somebody deserves to pay for what they did. And I think we owe it to them. I keep looking at their picture. We owe it to them, to find answers for them.
We brought up a lot of leads in this 2-part story: DNA testing, the nephew, Stevie Stephenson, truckers, and of course that possible connection to Delphi. So where does it all stand right now? Well, Detective Cox stressed they have not ruled anyone out in the Stephenson case. So even though some leads don't look as likely, they haven't eliminated any of them completely.
The crime. Bill and Peggy Stephenson were 2 halves of a loving elderly couple known in Florence, Kentucky, for their church work and generosity. Bill had founded the Truckers' Chapel Ministry, a spot where traveling transporters could gather and pray. Peggy played organ at Union Baptist Church. They led quiet but impactful lives, according to their loved ones, which made the disturbing crime scene police discovered in May 2011 all the more unfathomable. On May 29, 2011, the Stephensons were slain in brutal fashion, bludgeoned and stabbed, and then, whoever killed them staged a bizarre scene. Detective Coy Cox, who's headed the Boone County Sheriff's investigation since day one, told me he's been guarded and careful about the details he's released from the start. What he will say is that the bodies had been posed. Items inside the house had been moved around. There wasn't one room in that house that wasn't staged, Cox said recently on a podcast called Just the Tipsters, in which host Melissa Morgan features unsolved cases. Over the years, bits and pieces of information about the confounding crime have trickled out from investigators, though they keep certain details under wraps. For example, they'll only publicly say that the deaths occurred sometime between 1 to 4 a.m. May 29, but Cox said they have the precise time of death thanks to a medical device implanted in one of the victims. The scene. Investigators have long believed that whoever killed the Stephensons knew them. This is based on a few things. There was no sign of forced entry at their condo, and the couple would have had to buzz in any visitors. Neighbors were situated quite close, yet reported nothing out of the ordinary. The killers also seemed comfortable in the environment, staying hours after the couple was killed to inflict a postmortem injury on one of them and stage the scene. There also was a message left by the killers, Cox said, though he wouldn't share the details. Not cold. Cox said he and his team have visited more than a dozen states working on this case. Because Bill Stephenson had so much contact with truckers passing through town, a number of tips have related to people living hundreds of miles away. Cox also has conferred with a psychic hoping for a breakthrough, and has taken the case to the Vidic Society, which accused listeners will recognize from season 1 as the volunteer group of professionals who gather in Philadelphia monthly to give insight into cold cases. Cox is quick to correct that this case isn't cold, though. It's old, he said, but it's never been set aside, which is what the cold label connotes. The nephew. As Morgan said in her podcast, a lot of people assumed the killer in this case had been found when one of the Stephensons' nephews was arrested in connection with another murder. Charles Stevie Stephenson was convicted in the 2012 of beating 67-year-old Lee Jennings of Indiana to death with a skillet and pepper grinder. Stephenson was sentenced in 2013 to life in prison without parole. It's understandable people assumed a connection. After all, what are the odds? But Bill Stephenson was one of 14 kids, so the odds are a bit higher than average. It turns out that police have DNA evidence that they believe came from the killers, and it doesn't match the nephew's. He is not a suspect in the case. The motive. Motive isn't always easy to spot in the most straightforward of murder cases, and this one is anything but. Cox said the easy defense items robbers steal were left untouched. Photos were arranged to suggest the killers liked certain people and disliked others, but it all feels scripted. There's a lot about this scene you wouldn't believe, Cox said. The one thing Cox is certain of is this: they both had to die, he said. If only one half of the couple had been targeted, there was ample opportunity to attack each alone. It also would have been fairly easy to overpower and restrain either 74-year-old so that the killers could harm one while sparing the other. The obvious question. For anyone who follows crime, the first thing that likely comes to mind when law enforcement has DNA is, have investigators uploaded the profile into a database such as gedmatch.com, where people voluntarily submit their DNA? That's how the long-elusive Golden State Killer was identified 2 years ago as Joseph James D'Angelo, a man who's since pleaded guilty to a string of horrific rapes and homicides in the 1970s and 1980s. D'Angelo was sentenced this month to life in prison. I asked this of Cox. The DNA is not suitable for genealogy or phenotyping at this time, he said. We hope in the future that changes. This could imply a few things, including that the DNA is from more than one person. What should happen? In this case, what should happen is actually what is happening. Cox not only gave that podcast interview recently, but he also appeared on a radio show and responded to me within minutes when I reached out. He skips no chance at spreading the word about this case because, he said, he's sure someone out there has the info he needs. This one's not going to go unsolved, he said. Got tips? Step on up. Tips have increased since Cox's appearance on the Santa Clarita-based Tipsters podcast. That, in turn, has prompted the Stephenson family to offer a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the killers. Cox has set up a special email address at stephensonTip@boonecountyKey.org, or tipsters can call 859-334-8496 or 844-210-1111 toll-free. Accused.
So what do you all think of that? Let me know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Talk to you next time.